and also with you.
Let us pray. God of abundance, foundation of all of our relationships, we give you thanks for the technology and the wisdom that brings us together today. We pray that we may listen with open hearts, that we may learn from one another as we seek to bring about your kingdom, your love, your justice, and your mercy in our communities through the act of stewardship. Be with us this day, now and always. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. So again, good morning all. If you cannot hear me, please raise your hand. As a participant, you can go and find yourself, you should find yourself, and there's a raised hand opportunity. If you cannot hear me, raise your hand. Nobody's raising their hand. That's a good sign. So again, interpretation is available in Spanish. You would, under the interpretation button, which looks like a little globe on the bottom, usually on the bottom of your screen, depending on the device you're working with, you can click either English or Spanish to listen, okay? So today, we welcome once again with us, Davey Gerhardt. He's the Executive Director of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. Davey was last with us in July to talk with us about virtual offering plates and campaigns, and about how to do galas and event-based fundraising virtually. Those webinars are posted with our stewardship resources and can be downloaded if you missed them the first time. Today, we will be specifically focused on how to use the TENS resources for virtual stewardship campaigns this year. The Diocese of LA is a member of TENS, which means that all of you can access these resources for your churches at no cost. That means they're free. Davey joins us from his home in San Francisco, where June gloom has extended, like everything else these days, into August. And Davey, we're down here sweating. It's hot in Southern California. He serves also as the Director of Development, Stewardship, and Planned Giving for the Diocese of California, and he attends Holy Innocents Church in San Francisco's Noe Valley neighborhood. Davey, every year, TENS adopts a theme for its stewardship campaigns. This year is faith-filled generosity. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about this theme and why it's particularly important this year?
I can. And thank you all for having me. It's great to be with you again. I'm going to share my screen. So you're going to see a PowerPoint slide deck that I'll be going through. I think that slide deck will be made available to all of you in English and in Spanish. So, but here it is. Let me share. Give me a second here to get us all right. Now you can see, we'll stop sharing at the end of this presentation so you can go back to seeing each other, which is, I know, why you all join these calls, really. But we're happy to have you here. Thank you so much. So, faith-filled generosity. Every year, TENS develops a theme for its stewardship materials to help collect our thoughts and present our stewardship campaigns in a particular way. So this year, we picked faith-filled generosity. And it comes from our understanding and our study of this passage from 1 Timothy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, thus storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of the life that is really life. And this life that is really life, this world that we create, that we participate with God in the ongoing creation of the world, is how we create our own theology, our own faith-filled ideas on abundance and stewardship. So this is a really important concept for us to think about as we frame our stewardship this year, where we are focusing on the gifts of our faith that create the possibility for abundance and generosity. So what does this mean for us? As we've moved through Matthew's gospel this year, we've been hearing all about how Jesus teaches us to be in relationship with each other. Relationship is one of the things that we talk about all the time when we're focusing on stewardship. It was the theme of the first few of these webinars that we've had in the Diocese of Los Angeles, relationship. It's this idea that we are all participants in this growing of the reign of God, and our gifts, all of them, our spiritual gifts, our physical gifts, our financial gifts, our gifts of time, are all ways that we do this work together. And our relationship with God begins at the very creation, as we participate with God in the creation of the world. This is why we're inspired to be so generous, to be so abundant. So our theme this year, as we move through stewardship, we'll keep coming back to this idea of faith-filled generosity. We have a little sheet that you can download. It's an introduction to this idea. So maybe as a part of your stewardship campaign this year, you might want to start off by letting people know why we picked this theme and what it means to them.
So are there any questions on this before I ask Davey to explain more about what is different this year and what is new from TENS to help us address the challenges of stewardship in this year? Any questions out there in the chat? Please put your questions in the chat, okay? No questions, Rachel says. So Davey, it's all yours.
Great. So, newsflash, 2020 is different from every other year we've ever had. This is crazy, right? So since March, we've been all living in this world, adapting and adopting new ways of being together. When I started creating this year's stewardship model, we had no idea that we were going to be faced with the things that we are, where communities are meeting virtually, and we may very well be meeting virtually in stewardship season in October and November. And then the other, I think, equally difficult challenge is that some communities may be meeting again in person, but there will be a significant number of folks who aren't yet ready to come back into a building together. And so we're going to have hybrid churches where we need to, on a normal Sunday, in a usual year, people may not show up in church because they're ill or they're busy or they're somewhere traveling, right? But now we have people who can't be in church, should we open them again by October and November, who aren't there not because they are busy or because they can't, but because they don't want to be back in in-person community yet. And that's real and that's valid. So as we move into stewardship, we're going to have to think about how we accommodate everyone, people who are gathered virtually, people who are gathered together, and deliver stewardship materials that are ready for them. We're going to cover that in some detail in this presentation. We're also going to talk about how we message fundraising in churches in the middle of economic fallout and uncertainty. So those are things that are very real to us as we move into stewardship season, as we talk about next year's church budgets, as we talk about the comfort and ability that people have to be generous. They are going to be shaped by some very real financial factors and some uncertainty. So we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that we can move through those conversations together. Welcome to a new and different year. One of the things that if you've used TENS before, you'll understand that the materials have the weekly reflections, the letters from your rector, from your stewardship chair. They have pledge cards. One of the things that's new to us this year is that we've put together a how-to guide. And that's something that you can download along with the rest of the materials. We have a way to do this for virtual church, hybrid church, and if you are blessed enough to be meeting 100% in person again, we have ways for you to do stewardship that way too. So we're covering all of those bases. The ones that we'll be talking about today is the timeline and how-to guide for virtual stewardship. So in the last couple of weeks we talked about, or the last time we met, We talked about virtual offering plates and ways to collect money in churches online. So we're recommending that now in August, if you haven't yet done that, choose your technology on how you're going to gather virtually and how you are going to gather money virtually. So both of those technologies may need some adaptation. You may already be doing, probably already doing virtual worship services. So that technology you're probably a pro at by now. You may or may not have implemented a virtual offering plate yet. We recommend that you're going to want to do that to go through this stewardship season so that people can make their pledges with online gifts and move through the system that way. Do your website, social media, streaming services, newsletters offer ways to gather pledges? So that's not just to say, have you picked out your technology yet, but do you have it integrated in all of your channels of communication? Communication is so critical in how we get out the message always, and particularly when we can't rely on in-person meetings to talk with each other and see people in the hallway or before or after church services or at the back of the church. We need to find and shape those ways intentionally on how we create those communication strategies. And have you looked at your newsletter format? And I say this because I think a lot of us have been using the same format for our newsletter for a while. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing, but we need to refresh our newsletters from time to time. Put things in a different place, use a different kind of color or picture or font or something. Help people understand that it's new, give them a reason to click on it and open it. If we get something that looks the same every week in our inbox, we may not be excited about opening it up. So that's a way that we might want to create that. Another thing in your newsletter, my church, for example, has gone to an online newsletter. It gets emailed out once a week. And because of the way we are, we do all of the exciting announcements, the celebrations of birthdays and anniversaries. We've relied on doing that in person. And our newsletters kind of talk about events and calendars and things like that. So as we've been meeting virtually, that newsletter is still going out. We see that there are things on the calendar, most of which are meeting virtually. And we don't have the personal stories anymore. So I'm suggesting if your newsletter doesn't have some ways that people can connect with each other and learn about each other, that you add those things in as we move into stewardship season so that people feel like they are our community. Another part of the how-to guide, we issue this year a who and a when. So a who, a what, and a when of how your stewardship campaign should work. So I'm recommending that you gather testimonials from your members on recorded videos or find other ways to tell those stories. Many of you may rely on testimonials or minutes for mission or announcements that happen at the chancel steps, maybe just before the piece or after the piece or at announcement time, however your liturgy is formatted. And that's when people tell their own story of faith and why they choose to support the congregation. So this year, as we may not be meeting in person, we're meeting virtually, please solicit those testimonials and record them. All of us on our phones can make a quick video and talk about why we love our church, why we support it with our gifts, why it's worthy of support. And those can be distributed in any number of ways. They can be emailed, they can be put on a website, they can be streamed into your service, they can be shown. Those testimonials are peer-to-peer ways that we connect with each other about the mission of stewardship. We're going to talk later about these small groups that TENS is recommending that we develop around stewardship this year. You may already do small groups for your fundraising and your stewardship campaigns. We're recommending this year that every congregation try to implement some small groups to form community and spirituality around that idea of our faith-filled generosity. Finally, take a look at your stewardship materials. What is it that you are sending out this year as a part of your stewardship packet? TENS gives you pledge cards, but we don't provide marketing collateral, for lack of a better word, the kinds of materials you would use to make your case. What are those this year? Do you usually do like a trifold brochure or a folded brochure in some way that talk about the ministries? Do you use bar charts or pie charts or graphs to talk about your budget and your gifts and how you spend and collect your money? As you put together those resources, think about the ways that you're going to send them out and make certain that you can send them out electronically this year because you'll not be able to rely on people stopping by the back of the church to pick up their stewardship envelope this year. So think about how those materials are going to get distributed. So a timeline. This year, we are hoping that you get started nice and early. That's why we're having these webinars in July and in August to help you get ready, not only in the mechanics, but also in the theology of your stewardship. So we hope that you will form your stewardship committee now, if it hasn't already been formed, and get some good volunteers. We have a little job description later on for what that looks like. We hope that you will use the reflection for the month of August that we have created. It summarizes some of the gospels that occur in the month of August and give a theological stewardship approach to them. So please download that and use it to begin the theological conversation. We recommend that you start running announcements in your newsletter or your bulletin that campaign is starting soon. Start to build the hype and get people excited about it. So start early. In your pre-campaign, get things moving now. Everything takes a little longer in the pandemic. So help people be ready and start your committees, get them going, get them framed. Test and research your technology. We can't stress this point enough. You don't want to get a week away from campaign launching and realize that you don't have all of your pieces in place. Build the hype. So start making announcements, let people know that there's something exciting happening, that there are new ideas about stewardship, that we're going to be doing them, that we are running campaigns this year. Download our introduction to what faith-filled generosity is. And you can use that as a teaching tool. Prepare theologically. And then drop your first letter. So we have sample letters, a letter from clergy and a letter from the stewardship chair or senior warden, however you prefer to do it. Those are customizable. We give them to you in Word so that you can put your own letterhead on it. You can put in your own church's mission or ministry ideas. You can customize them. We give you kind of the bare bones for how to do that. I would recommend that you drop that letter from your clergy in the post or in email around September 14th this year if you're going to kick off on October 4th, so that you can get that in people's hands nice and early. Let them know that this is expected and we're ready to go with it. I'm going to stop in a couple slides and ask for questions. I see some are coming in, and that's great. So we have a couple more slides to get through, and then we'll answer some of your questions. During the campaign, so as you kick off this year, we want you to do something exciting, something that makes people feel connected. I was talking this week with a rector from a church in Akron, Ohio, and she was telling me how usually they have a big kickoff celebration at the home of a parishioner, with a catered lunch, and everybody's very excited about it, and that's what they do in their community. And how they were lamenting this year that they wouldn't be able to do it. And so the way their stewardship committee addressed this is that they are arranging with the catering company to have little bags of food ready, and people can go and pick it up and bring it to their house, and they'll have a Zoom at the same time where people share the meal in their own home, but with each other, and they can kick off their stewardship campaign that way. So as we kick off, think about ways to include everyone virtually so that we can have a big celebration. We suggest kicking off on October 4th, but if your congregation is one that blesses animals and spends the day on October 4th thinking about Francis, you might want to kick off the next Sunday. It all depends on how much bandwidth and how much time you have to do that, and how much importance you can give stewardship if there is an animal focus. We're all trying to figure out how we're going to bless animals virtually this year. It'll make the dogs and cats happy because they won't have to be together in church. The rest of us will have to figure out our coworkers from home. Send the next letter in October. So after your kickoff, send that next letter from your campaign chair or your senior warden, and make certain in that you put in your materials, your case for giving, your pledge cards, whatever budget or any information that you put into your stewardship packet, send that out. I don't know if your post is a little slower these days, but mine certainly is. So things might take a while to go through the US mail. Make sure that you give plenty of time for materials to get out to people's houses. Everything is slower in the pandemic. Use our weekly pledge season inserts. They go from October 4th through November 22nd. And they will help you relate the readings each week to stewardship themes and generosity and abundance. And then we'll talk a little bit later about these small groups that I keep mentioning, how to run them and why they're important. On Dedication Sunday, make sure you have a really big celebration this year because we've done really important work. And so however you do that, at a Zoom coffee hour or at some sort of event, please make sure that you do celebrate your dedication. I recommend that you might do that on the first Sunday in Advent, but if that's not your custom, you can do it certainly on Christ the King and wrap up the church year that way. It depends on what your custom is, but please make a big deal about counting your pledges, offering them up to God, blessing them, celebrating what we've all done, thanking all of your leadership. Remember to thank all of your volunteers who have hosted meetings and done extra work. And always remember the mission. The mission is the reason we raise money in church. The mission, to accomplish the mission, to increase the mission, that's why we do what we do. It's why we ask people to make extraordinary gifts. It's why we ask people to participate in stewardship. Finally, implement a follow-up plan. It's the last thing that your stewardship committee wants to do after they've worked hard during stewardship season. But have a game plan ready to go on how you're going to reach out to people whose pledge hasn't yet come in so that you can count them in the pledge campaign and hopefully get them to make their pledge before the holidays come. Are there any questions before we move on to the next section, Bishop Diane?
There were questions about whether, oh, there's Rachel. Rachel's in charge of the chat.
Sorry. The questions were about, will things be posted on the website? Everything will be posted on the website. I'm just answering that. In case you're wondering, all of our previous webinars are on there. And I'm also taking this moment to say that we do have our short three-question survey in English and Spanish. Please fill that out if you have to leave early. Other than that, I have not seen any other massive questions at this time.
So Davy,
Yeah.
Stewardship in 2020 comes with so many more challenges than we've ever had before. And it's not just the mechanics. Has TENS been thinking about how to talk about fundraising in light of these economic and social concerns we're all facing? It's a difficult time. What is TENS doing?
Thanks. Thanks for asking that question. And I recommend that as we move through this year, we think about the elephants in the room of our stewardship campaign. So not only is 2020 different because there's a global pandemic and a health crisis that we haven't faced in 100 years, in many generations, but we are also going through an economic fallout that is associated with that. So people, as they approach stewardship, it's on our mind, right? Church already is a difficult place to talk about money in some places. It's hard to have those conversations. And it's even more difficult when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling nervous about it. And yet it's all the more reason why we have to state up front what's the situation that we're facing and what's going on. So the first thing I want to remember is that there is no shame, no guilt in stewardship. Guilt and shame do not belong in stewardship. I would even say duty doesn't belong there either. Stewardship is a gift. Stewardship season is a season of gift giving and gift understanding. It is about generosity and abundance. I know that you all know that, but we need to reinforce that message as we move through this year. So if a household, and we hate to do this, right? People say, I can't make the gift that I made last year, and I really feel bad about it. And what's beautiful is they're making a gift at all. Changes, we understand it's a different year this year, and some households are not going to be able to do what they did last year. Just remember that there's no shame in that. Make it a safe place for people to make their gift. We also have to remember that people do their stewardship prayerfully, intentionally. We must trust, and I say must, we must trust that they've prayed about this, that they've thought about their giving, that they've spoken with their family about the gift that they want to make and can make. They've done all that work before making their pledge. So whatever pledge they've given is the best that they can do. Let's extend that goodwill and help people feel good about the giving that they can do this year. Also remember that if we are feeling the pressure, maybe our household income is diminished, not every household is experiencing the struggle in the same way. And that's to say, not to say that we should dismiss households that are, but we should remember that not every household is experiencing the same financial strain in the same way. So some of our members may be able to increase their gifts, right? It could happen. And I'm saying that to say, let's not move into the stewardship season by saying, oh, it's going to be worse than it was last year. Oh, it's going to be hard. Let's remember the grace and the generosity that some people may be able to make larger gifts. Not every gift is going to be diminished. So if we move through that and help adjust our expectations, we can still ask people if they can increase, please do. And that's a really important thing to remember as people of faith. Every conversation about money in church is a pastoral one. And we talked about this last week or a couple weeks ago when we talked about those conversations that we have around money, right? We don't just talk about finances and checks and pledges. When we talk with money about each other, when Christians engage the conversation about money, we are also talking about our hopes and our dreams, our retirement plans, our kids going to school, our health concerns, all the things that go into our personal finances. So remember that those are pastoral, beautiful, deep, theological, spiritual conversations between sisters and brothers. Let's also not forget that we've been in a hard place financially recently. 2008 and 2009 wasn't so long ago. It's still stuck in most of our memories, and we recovered. We recovered from it, our economy recovered from it, and we will recover again. We'll recover in a different way. It won't be the same as it was, but we will recover. This is another statement of Christian hope. This too shall pass. We will recover from this situation. Finally, let's remember that the work of the church is more acute when society is experiencing anxiety and need. So the case for church giving doesn't go down, even when we may not have as much to share. So that's to remind us that our neighbors, our neighborhoods are struggling and they need our services. So it's another reminder to keep talking about the mission. I have some other ideas about how to talk about stewardship if your congregation is facing cuts in budget, program, or staff. So this is a reality that some congregations may be experiencing as we move into our pledge season. And we should be transparent and open and proactive about it if that is the situation that is happening in your congregation. Keep your conversation focused on mission. As I just said before, the work of the church continues because the needs of our neighbors are still present. So even when we are faced with fewer hours or fewer people or fewer programs, we still have to provide that work. It's the reason that our churches exist in our neighborhoods. Another one is to talk about if you received SBA or payroll protection plan loans. This is a reminder that churches haven't been fallow or silent during this. We've been preparing for the financial impact of this recession that is related to the pandemic. We've been preparing and we've been taking on resources from all the places that we could. Some congregations I know asked members to pay up their pledges if they could, if they were in a position to do that, to pay off for the year so that they would have cash reserves. Some congregations applied and received federal funds and loans, and they're going through the process right now of having those forgiven. Remind people that that insulated us for a while, that the church has been doing everything it can to avoid the pain and the cuts. So we haven't been sitting idly by. Your diocese has been working on this. Your congregation has been working on this. Organizations that support you have been working on this. So you're not alone. And this is the final thing I want to say about how to talk about money when we, and stewardship when we're talking about church this year. And that is to say that there are some members who are just fine or are even doing very well in this pandemic. The stock market, which looked terrible a few months ago, is back up in a lot of cases and in a lot of sectors. And depending on performance, some people may have plenty to give. And there may be members in your community that can make an extraordinary gift to cover unexpected shortfalls. Ask them. This is the time to ask people if they are able to make an extraordinary gift to do so. You probably know them. Maybe you are holding off on asking them for their big gift because you're going to remodel the kitchen next year or you're thinking about some other project. But this is one of those moments when there may be people who have something to share that they can make that extraordinary gift. Finally, I want us to talk about uncertainty. So it is really hard, and I want to acknowledge that it's really hard for people considering their pledges and for treasurers considering next year's budgets and for church communities considering next year's programs to figure out what to do when we really don't know what 2021 is going to bring us. There may be a change in government. There may be a change in our economy. 2020 has been a lesson in expect the unexpected, and it keeps surprising us. So we really don't know what 2021 looks like. And I don't say that so that it increases our anxiety or makes us despair, but to remind us that we Christians know how to deal with uncertainty. We've been dealing with it. We have methods and processes and theology in place. It's our Christian hope. So way back in Epiphany, we heard this from Matthew's gospel. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? I'm not sure about the value. Sometimes I think birds are pretty great. But in general there, what we're reminding ourselves is that we are people of hope. Yes, times are uncertain. One message that I want to bring into that is about people who make pledges and they're fearful about that pledge. We always say it in my congregation during pledge season, you can come back and change your pledge if you need to. We say this in good years, we say this in bad years. If you have a household need, a financial surprise, a health concern, you get a new job and you're making more money, you can change your pledge at any time. And that is an honest, straightforward, trusted conversation to have. It's a pastoral one. It doesn't need to be shame-filled or scary. It's honest. So if somebody makes a pledge and they can't fulfill it in the way they anticipated, let them know that's okay. The important thing is that we make the gifts that we can and prepare for the best that we can. In all things, we have to remember and teach that giving is about prayer and spirit-filled grace and generosity. So please teach that this stewardship season. Do we have any questions before we move on?
Indeed, we do. There are two. Julie Che rightly asks, can you speak to reaching folks who are Zoom averse or don't have access to the internet in their homes, which I'm sure you expected. Yep. I loved your comment about hybrid church, and it's almost like we need a hybrid approach. So could you speak to that? And then we have one more after that.
Yep. I have two things to say about folks who don't have technology or folks who are averse to technology, and they both are about respect. We all choose in the digital age how we want to engage with the digital world. It's out there and it's a reality, but not everybody's adopting it at the same rate. So I have two thoughts on that. Zoom, the platform we're using now, does allow people to use the good old-fashioned telephone, technology that we are all comfortable with, I hope, to use and be involved in a webinar, in a Zoom meeting, in a Zoom potluck or social group or whatever. You won't be able to see their faces, they won't be able to see yours, but they can hear and they can be heard. So for people who really don't know how to use, maybe they don't have a webcam, maybe they don't have a reliable internet connection, they can use their phone and they can dial in. If you can get them the number, they can do that. That's a fail-safe, foolproof, always works, helps people stay involved. The other way, this happened at the beginning of the pandemic when congregations were trying to figure out how to go online and how to be virtual. And they had people who didn't know the technology, who hadn't used it ever before. And so this example comes from Transfiguration Church in San Mateo, California, where they empowered a band of Gen Z members to get on the phone with folks who were afraid or didn't know the technology, and they coached them through how to access Zoom, how to do it, how to set up a profile, how to use Facebook and how to see Facebook Live. They walked them through, and they would call them up on Sundays and say, are you logged in? It was this amazing intergenerational moment of folks who may not talk to each other in a given Sunday on church. They may pass each other or may go to different services, right? But here they were reaching out, and they had a whole cohort of Gen Z folks who were able to reach out to some of their boomers and late boomers and other generations and talk about how to get online. It was a really cool idea and one of the ways that we are engaged. Hybrid church was the second part of that question. It's going to be messy, right? So when we all moved virtually, it was in a way kind of an easy shift, even though we had to adapt to new technologies in new ways. It was the same concept. The church door opens at a time and we're all in one place to view it. That's the virtual church model that we've been dealing with for some time. Now we're going to have a new way when some people do come back to church and others don't. We're going to have to continue offering the same virtual services so that people can connect online as we do now when we are 100% virtual. So that's going to be a little messy, right? It's going to mean that if we're doing communion, there should be a camera up there around the altar. We hate that, right? We hate seeing that when we're in church. We may need to get used to it for hybrid church. The choir, who knows if they can all gather, right? So how are we going to do congregational singing when we are doing hybrid church? Think through these things and help people prepare for the fact that it might be a little messy and that there may be people who are, I don't know how we project their faces on Zoom or Facebook Live, but that they are a part of the congregation. And they're not just people who are missing a service, they're people who are included in the service and participating with you. That's intentional, but it's going to require a little bit of goodwill on all of our parts because we don't like messy in church when we're thinking about our liturgies. There was another question, I think.
2 more questions. Do you have advice on setting up or structuring small groups? And they reference the Iona community, and that's a very intense, deeply trusting. That's one format, but are there others? Which I want to say you addressed some of this in the relationships, so it might be back in that webinar, but maybe you could just give us a little 1-minute synopsis on some possibilities, and then I have one thing to follow.
Great. Well, to that question, stay tuned because that's the next section of slides. We're going to talk a lot more about those small groups and how we form them. You may have questions about how they should be formed and assigned, how we assign people to groups, how we create them. So we're going to talk about that in the next group of slides. If you still have questions about small groups, ask it again and we'll clarify them. So we will go into detail.
Great, thank you. And then the last question at this moment is, do you have any creative ideas for the actual in-gathering of the pledges? And are we assuming that everyone will mail in a pledge card?
I'm not assuming that everyone will mail in a pledge card. I mean, it may happen, but if, you can also email them in, like I email my pledge card. I just.
We do the same. We have that option.
Right. So, and some people, if you're using software, if you're using a software platform that allows people to make pledges and recurring gifts, you may not get an envelope of any kind from them. You may get an email that says, Davey just pledged X amount for next year, right? So the ways that we do that symbolically at that dedication Sunday or that in-gathering Sunday, I think we're going to have to figure out, I mean, we don't want to like get in the bad habit of printing off emails, wasting paper so that we can bless them. But we can hold up a basket or we can have a plate with the pledge cards that have been mailed in and contribute all the other ideas and gifts that have come through that symbolically and hold that up and have it for blessing. We're going to talk at the very end about some liturgical resources that help the offertory in general, but also that in-gathering. There are lots of ways that I've heard people do this. One community is like every week if they are receiving checks in the mail, they're taking the empty envelopes, with a stamp on it or whatever, and they're putting it in the basket and holding it up and saying, this represents all of our gifts that have come in virtually and through checks. So there are lots of ways to do that. And we're happy to talk about that more with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're good.
And I would just like to add, in terms of people that are averse to Zoom, I've got a couple of retired clergy that just don't want to go on Zoom. And so that old-fashioned phone call to build relationship every week is very, very important. So if somebody is averse to even phoning in for a Zoom, which I have a couple that, that just don't want to do that, touching base with them, letting them know by hearing your voice, not just reading it, letting you, and it takes time, right? It does take time, but it's reaching out to somebody that's otherwise isolated from your community. So if you've got people like that, call them before an event, call them after an event. They can be just as excited hearing about how everybody else was excited until we can all come back together again. So that would be my take on that. But Davey, I think there's even more resources that TEN's got coming up. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, I can. So let's talk about these small groups that people are interested in, and some of the resources that we have ready to go. So the TENS materials for fall stewardship are all ready. They are on our website. They are ready for you to download. And so we want you to use these weekly meditations that we have created from October 4th through November 22nd, as well as any of the earlier ones that have seasonal reflections. All of the letters, pledge cards, all of the ideas, the how-to guides, it's all ready for you to download. On these weekly meditations, they're related to the assigned readings, and they frame your readings for stewardship themes. You can use them in your small groups. You can use them in a Zoom coffee hour to talk about stewardship. You can even use them as inspiration for your sermon. Each reflection has a question or two that help frame a conversation, a dialogue around stewardship topics. We have a diversity of voices this year from all over the country, lay folks and ordained folks who have contributed to these weekly reflections, including Bishop Diane and me. I'm one of the people who wrote one. Let's celebrate our diversity of voice across the church. You hear lots of different people, or see lots of different people say lots of different things about stewardship and the resources that are out there. So this is a great way just to get new voices in. I love hearing new voice in church, always. So you've been hearing about these small groups, and we're going to spend a couple of slides going more deeply on what this is about. So this year we recommend that you really engage this process of small groups. You can assign them in any number of ways. I am working with one group, one church, that they're going to use sort of an affinity model. They're going to put all the people who like to knit and crochet and quilt into a stewardship group and talk about it, and then answer these questions and do some Bible studies. And they're going to put the gardeners together. They're going to put the social justice warriors together, have these affinity groups of people who already have something to do with each other. That's one way to form some small groups. Another way is to have your volunteers who are going to host these small groups maybe go through the directory and pick the people that they know, people that they like or know or are friendly with. And I would say, let's say, for example, you're having groups of 12. I would say let them pick 8 people and then assign them 4 new ones. So that they're not just picking a clique of their friends and the favorite people that they know, but they're getting some new people into these groups. It fosters more communication and collaboration in your community and helps form some communities. And or just assigning it through your directory. Davey's going to take A through C, and Diane's going to take D through F, and however, assign those groups and create your small group communities around them. What does a small group leader do? So they are committed to stewardship. They've made their own pledge, and they've been asked and they've said yes. They understand faith-filled generosity and they embrace it. They know why your church is raising money this year. So they can answer questions about the ministries and the mission of your church, or they can direct people to have more specific answers if they need them. So that's to say, your volunteers should know why you're raising money, what the various ministries you support inside and outside your church are. They should know the budget, at least have some familiarity with it and can speak to it. So I would train these small group leaders, have a session with the clergy and the treasurer to make sure that they can talk about how we gather and spend our money. Your small group leaders are good listeners and facilitators. They are not there to teach. They are there to foster good conversation and keep things moving, right? So have those facilitators create groups that can be intimate and vulnerable and mutually supportive, and help them by using the techniques that you would normally use in small group work to help them create communities that are healthy, that are diverse, that have the ability to engage people who are introverts and extroverts, have all those tools that we use in small groups to keep them healthy and good. Your small group leaders, if you're doing them virtually, should be comfortable with the technology. You should have practiced with them at least once so that they know how to log into Zoom and invite people, and to use these Zoom tools. So Zoom tools, we have a lot of ways to make security possible. When the pandemic started, you remember there were those awful stories about people Zoom bombing. They've made it really easy now to have waiting rooms, like you all had a waiting room to come into this call. That way you can verify that's a person I know, I'm going to let them in. You can ask people questions. Who are you? I don't recognize that name. You can admit, and you also have some tools about how to mute people, how to turn on and off their cameras, what to allow them to do, so that if you have someone who needs some special attention or things just are going off the rails, you have some tools on how to keep your meetings safe. How many small groups do you need? So I'm suggesting that your groups should have no more than 12 people. This is so that you can have a real chance to have conversation and dialogue. So beyond that, we start to get feeling rushed. If you're meeting for an hour, for example, not everybody can speak. If there is a big group and you want people to participate and learn from each other, but you should probably not have a group that's smaller than 6, right? Because then it's too small, perhaps. Find that happy medium, but also always it relies on how big your congregation is and how many volunteers you have, right? So my numbers are just suggestions. If you only have 4 volunteers and you have 200 members, well, then your groups might be bigger and you're going to have to figure out how to do that. But I like to think about 12 as a good group size. And you should also have people who can meet at least 3 times during the stewardship season. And we'll talk about those small groups. One to kick off, one to have a Bible study, and one to have sort of a topical study. We're going to go into those in a minute. So 3 small group, I just said it. I just said my next slide. So one of the first meeting of your small group should be about the kickoff. And the host should make sure that everybody has materials and pledge cards, everything that goes along with the campaign. So if they haven't received them or can't find them, the host should be able to email them out really quickly, send people their stuff. If your church is one that does personalized letters, dear Davy, last year you gave $100. Thank you so much. And you don't want people to see that, well, then you're going to have to make certain that they received their mail from the church office or however that went out. Just make sure that everybody has their materials ready to go. The second meeting of your three should be a Bible study. And we're going to look at some passages in a minute and how you might structure that group. So pick a passage on a stewardship theme, and in that meeting, ask people to pray about their upcoming pledge, what they might be doing. And then the third one is the appreciative inquiry questions, and we'll talk about these as well in a minute. Focusing on the mission and the vision and what's possible. So this last session should be dreaming about our church, who we are and what we are in the community. And this is the one where the invitation to pledge, to join me in making a pledge this year should come. So those are your three meetings. If you can do more, have more, but I suggest at least you have these three. What does a small group study format look like when it's about Bible and a passage from the Bible? So this was in our last slideshow. You may see this as familiar. And the next slide is going to have a whole bunch of scripture passages. You're going to get both of these slides so you don't have to furiously take down notes right now. But this is just one model of many that you might use for a Bible study on stewardship. So I love the idea of reading a passage 3 times in 3 different voices. Again, bring in a diversity of voices, perhaps even from different Bible translations. And then close with a prayer. And those 3 questions for each 3 times you read a passage help funnel us through that Bible study. So talking about a word or a phrase or an idea that comes out, talking about what God or Jesus might be saying to us. And then finally, what are we called to do because of this passage? Those are beautiful questions to ask in a small group. Here's the list, it's a big one, of all the passages that you might look at from Christian and Hebrew scriptures. You may have more, and you may have ones that you work with. Please use them. This is just a selection of some of the ones that we've put together. You'll be getting this slide again, so don't worry about writing it down. I spoke earlier about the topical questions in that 3rd small group meeting, this appreciative inquiry model. It's something that maybe many of you are already familiar with. It helps us focus on what's possible, good, and exciting. And it intentionally does not ask negative questions or frame problems. So some of these questions that you might ask in a small group are about what's exciting to you? What do you find energy in? Who's doing this work in our community well besides us? What can we learn from each other? And what are you willing to share personally? Finally, and this might be the controversial slide in this presentation, I am suggesting this year that the host of these small groups that has done such beautiful pastoral work of creating this vulnerable, beautiful community on stewardship and abundance, be the one to ask people to make their gift this year. Yes, your clergy will ask it, your warden will ask, your stewardship chair will ask, and they'll do it in letters and announcements. But in these small groups, the very last meeting should be an invitation from the host of the group to join them in making their gift to the church this year. That's not to say that you're asking them for a specific amount or asking them for a percentage. It's not a hard sell here. What you're saying is, I made my gift, and I'm inviting you to make yours. Will you join me this year? And then sit with that. Let them answer that question. Yes, I will. I'm not ready yet. I'd like more information. If you have more information to give, that's great. If you need to refer them to someone else, I've got deep questions about the budget. I really want to know more. Put them in touch with the people who can answer those questions. You're the facilitator of this. It's not your job to close the deal. You're just making that invitation. So please do it. It's a beautiful gift. Peer-to-peer fundraising is a really pastoral, joyous thing to do. I'm a fundraiser, so of course I'd say that. But it's a great way to be in community with each other. And so I invite you to teach your small group leaders how to do this. I think we have some questions about this section.
We do indeed. First question is, all right, sorry, I missed a question, so I'll come back to that one. When should small group meetings begin? Before the campaign begins or after it's been announced and it starts?
So if you're doing the three group model, if you can do 3 small groups in your campaign season, I'd suggest kickoff and then 2 more as the campaign goes on. So, you know, October 4th or something in that week, you know, something maybe around the end of October, and then something around the middle of November before people start getting too busy with Thanksgiving. Those are the 3 that I would recommend. If you can do more and you want to start now with your small groups and getting people to talk theologically about stewardship, the August meditation that we've put out is a great one for framing up our relationship with stewardship. You can use that in not just in August, you could use it in September. If you wanted, you could have small groups that start before the campaign. But I recommend at least those 3, kickoff, end of October, mid-November.
Okay, next question. Recent experience has demonstrated that a significant portion of the parish, 40% or more, is small group averse. Perhaps it means because they have to engage to participate. What effective alternatives to this tool do you have?
Yeah, so, well, if you don't run small groups and you just do stewardship as you normally would with the letters, the bulletins, the video testimonials, announcements, you'll still have a great stewardship program. The small groups are designed specifically to help people feel connected in this moment of disconnect. And I know that we have some anxiety as we begin to think about opening up our church doors again to receive people, that people may not come back like they were before, right? And so we're a little worried about numbers and how people are re-engaging and how soon they will. The small groups help form those communities that make people feel connected rather than isolated. And so that's why we recommend them. If your church is like, we don't want small groups, we've done all the small groups, and you can't sell them on this idea, then I would say try to do some large groups, try to do a forum after the principal service where you talk about some of these stewardship themes, use the weekly inserts to have a big congregation-wide conversation about stewardship, present some ideas and some materials, do some big stuff like that. If they're willing to do a large group, that might be good. I understand small groups are not everyone's thing. I love small groups. I'm a small group guy, but I understand some people are over it.
Question, do people opt into small groups or do you just assign everyone in the congregation?
That's up to you and your congregation. How would people feel about being opted in versus assigning? You could also create like a Google Doc spreadsheet where you could put all the names of the people who are hosts and 12 slots, and people could fill their own name in, right? So, and they could see that, and they could see who's a part of what group. so people can self-identify. There are so many ways to assign these small groups, and it's totally up to you, and you know how you relate and your congregation relates to each other. Are they the type that like to select their own destiny, or do they like having a structure given to them? That is totally reliant on how you all form and how you create it.
Okay, next question. What about the virtual coffee hour most churches have currently? Would it be a good idea to break into small groups the Sunday of the kickoff and start the small group process then?
I love it. Absolutely. So Zoom, if you're doing Zoom coffee hours, you may know it has a breakout feature so that you can create small groups and you can just say, you know, join Davey's group, and you can have people, either you can select them. I think actually you have to select them and push people into a group. Familiarize yourself with that tool. And then it's a great way to do it. So yeah, I would say please welcome that. If you have people who love to join those after church Zoom coffee hours, kickoff would be a great time to do it.
I think we're good at this point. Go right on ahead.
Great.
And Davey, if anybody put a question in the chat that wasn't answered yet, if you could repost your question, we'll get to that. So just to make sure that we capture everybody, just in case, because you know it's kind of hard to go back and forth.
Yeah.
What I also want to say is about people that are small group averse. Normally, they're small group averse unless the rector is in the room. And so a lot of times, if the rector hosts a small group of people that are reluctant to be in small groups, usually people will join. And it could be like a smaller small group. But I found that that's always been a big draw.
Yeah.
So Davey, how can we focus our liturgies for this year? Because liturgically, you know, it's been kind of different for us during this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
What is TEN's recommendation liturgically?
Part of them comes from your own diocese and the offertory sentences that Kay Sylvester from St. Paul's in Tustin created for a Zoom webinar a couple of months ago. So what I want us to talk about is the offertory itself. So I've been to tons of Zoom worship services since March, and Facebook Live, all of them, right? One of the things that is hit or miss is the offertory, right? So we're pretty good at doing communion or spiritual communion. We're good at the readings. We're good at the sermon. We figured all that out. But when it comes to the offertory, and we don't have plates that are being passed and elements that are coming up to the front of the church because they're sitting there on the credence table already, that movement, that drama, that moment of the offertory is missing. So I'm asking us during stewardship season to highlight the offertory and elevate our thought about stewardship and our gifts during that time. Whoops, I went too fast. So Kay presented many great sentences. I've offered just a few of them here. You'll get these slides and you can go back to the earlier presentation where they're like 2 pages of amazing offertory sentences from Kay. But these kind of frame our thinking and help us translate those words that are usually used to sort of quiet us down after the piece, and frame them into a really beautiful theological statement and get us ready for what comes next. So invite is the first way that we frame the offertory. And then we gather. So we talked earlier about this. What are ways that we can symbolically offer our gifts and show them when we are on camera to do so? So lots of people are, lots of congregations may have a moment of silence and say, if you're making a gift online, please do so now. This is the offertory. If you are the kind of congregation that can post a link to your Facebook or whatever you want to do in your comments, you can use that time for that. If you just want to have a moment of silence where people pray about what they've given and how they are giving it, if they're not weekly pledgers, maybe they do it monthly or annually or whatever, they may not have anything to do, they can think about it. And then I love having this time where we can be quiet and solemn about the sacramental ask and the sacramental act of giving. So we've invited, we've gathered, then we bless. So we bless what has come. If it's a plate full of envelopes that checks have received come in from the week, that's great. If it's other slips of paper that people have put their pledge information on, even if it's just a basket of abundance that we say, into this come our virtual gifts. This is the way we have received our gifts this week. We are giving them to the church, remembering why we give. So it's a time to bless them and bless the gifts that have come in. This is doubly true for your dedication Sunday. Take all that, bless it, hold it up, make a big deal about it. Things have happened here. Love has been shared. A sacramental act has happened. And then breaking. So just as we have invited, gathered, and blessed, we also break. So we share those gifts with the world. And I like to use that moment in the offertory, and I recommend that we take that time intentionally to talk about where our gifts go. Bring them right into that moment at the altar where we bless our food pantry or our after-school program or our elder care work or the immigrant and refugee work that we do, or whatever it is and whatever things, ministries that in which we are engaged. We bless that and we remember it right there at the altar as we are blessing the gifts that have come up. It's so much more inclusive than of thine own have we given thee, right? So this is about what do we do with the money and the gifts of time and talent that our congregation has donated, and how do they go out into the community? Any more questions?
Yes, apologies to Barrett, who I missed his question. We offlined and then it got buried in my chat feature. And I think this is true with many parishes, congregations. How do you handle those that decide not to fill out any pledge cards and are reluctant to share how much they wish to give during the year? Also, when you find out that a couple of families have not given any amount in many months or for the whole previous year, how do you reach out to these families that aren't involved with any proportional giving of treasure and yet provide in time and talent only?
Yeah, those are the big questions, right? I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that now we can all see each other. Look at that, we're all back. That's a really great question, and thank you for asking it. So the first one, what do we do with people who just don't want to fill out a pledge card and we know that they still give? We honor that. There are some members, and I know them in my own church, I've been on the stewardship committee before, they're going to give a very generous amount and they're never going to fill out any paperwork. They're averse to it. That's beautiful. I still write them a thank you note when their first gift comes in and say thank you very much for giving. And I just don't say pledge. I just say thank you for your gift. Some people are like that, and I honor that. I know that as church administrators and as budgeters, we want to know what's expected. Maybe if you know that person from years of their giving history, you know what you can count on. And so you can factor it in to your budget without having a document with their signed name on it. If it's the first time, maybe they don't know what pledging is. So maybe some one-on-one conversation with them about why Episcopalians do this funny thing called pledging and what it's like and how we do that is worth some time. When you see a household drop off, it's always a good idea for someone, the pastor usually, to check on them. Are we missing something? Did we, are you trying to send us money and it's going to the wrong place? I mean, that happens, right? Credit card or debit cards get messed up, banks make mistakes. Sometimes if we don't catch it soon, it becomes a big error. We notice that you've been giving and you stopped. But then pastorally, what's going on? This is just an opportunity. Somebody's saying something has changed. And so it's an opportunity to reach out to them pastorally. Others may have other ideas on that.
Davey, it was always well, I always had 10 people at St. Clement's that would always give me money but never pledge. So I issued them a pledge number. And when they asked me about that, I said, this is the only way I can give you a tax receipt, you know, or acknowledgement of what you've given. And that usually took care of it. But on the pastoral side, there are those that think that the rector or the vicar should never know what people give. I am adamantly opposed to that.
Yeah.
We need to know if somebody is falling. The rector or the vicar needs to know if somebody has fallen off on their giving, because 99% of the time it's a pastoral issue. And what ends up happening is if for some reason, some change in circumstance, they're embarrassed, they stop giving, and then they stop coming to church. And so the rector or vicar has to know and has to make those phone calls or arrange those meetings with the family early on. So to really kind of to offer the kind of pastoral care that only we can offer. So if you're in a church where, you know, for years and years and years, either the rector or vicar didn't want to know, or the finance committee and the vestry or bishops committee didn't want the rector or vicar to know, please talk to me. I'd be happy to talk. I think it's important.
No, it's true. I consulted with a congregation in our diocese that had like a locked file cabinet of pledge information, and they refused to give the rector the key to it. I mean, they were like, no. And it was a really interesting conversation with them about why the pastor should know what's going on. And because often people do things with they'll stop their giving before they tell you what's wrong, because they have to stop something right away. And so, yeah, I'm always a fan. It's not just because of pastoral reasons, but it's because we need to trust. And this is what I always go back to. Just as we trust that everybody who pledges makes a prayerful, intentional gift, we need to trust our pastors that they have good boundaries, that they see more than dollar signs when they look out into the pews. We are not just, you know, numbers and figures. We are people, and we trust them with deep conversations. Our money is one of those deep conversations that we can trust our pastor with.
Davey, we have about 8 more minutes, and I have 3 or 4 more questions. So I'm going to pop in so we can get through those, if that's okay.
We can go a little longer if people want to stay on and hear the rest. And we're going to have an announcement at the end.
Okay. I just trying to keep us, you know. How long should a small group meeting be?
About an hour, about 90 minutes. That's the max. Just like we're talking about right now. It's about the max that people can keep their attention. And especially these small groups may be happening in evenings. We have to remember in the pandemic that people have their children at home, their spouses working together at home. Home is a busier place than it might have been when there were things that took us outside the home. So let's try to honor people's evenings and weekends.
How would you suggest that those who are remaining with morning prayer highlight the offertory?
Well, there still is an opportunity to do an offering and morning prayer, and to bring those gifts up to the altar and elevate the plate and bless them. So it just happens in the same way. We acknowledge, we bless, we hold those gifts up at the altar. We still use the language, I would think, of invite, gather, bless, and break, even though we're not moving it right into a communion service.
Trust me, I was became an Episcopalian at St. Paul's in Burlingame, where the main service for three Sundays of the month was morning prayer. Trust me, there was always a collection.
Okay, I thought there was one more, but I think we're good to go.
Great.
I would like to, first of all, I want to thank Davey and TENS for all Davey's work today. He comes to you as the executive director of TENS. So please take a few minutes while I'm talking to fill out the survey. It's a quick survey. It's in English and in Spanish. The thing I want to tell you is that we are building this plane as we're flying it. You know, nobody's done stewardship like this in many years, because it's nothing's ever happened to us like this. So on Saturday, September 12th, we're going to be having the next installment of our work together on stewardship. And really what we're going to try to focus on there is do a little recap of where we've been, you know, the importance of relationship, you know, how to think about stewardship during a pandemic, how to do virtual galas and other things. Very, you know, a little bit of review. And then really, especially for those that might be nervous about making an ask or asking someone to pledge, we're going to walk through how to do that. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And just maybe do a little bit, maybe we're thinking about how to do this right now. Again, we're building this plane as we're flying it. But what we do know is that the way we ask is going to be different from the way we've ever done that before. And so we want to give you all the tools we can to help you with that. And then we'll also be having events in October and November, also building on each other, so that we can get you through the stewardship campaign for this year. Does that sound good to everybody? Please tell your friends, please tell your vicars and rectors, your finance chairs, members of your vestry. As many people can be on the Zoom as we can handle, as I think up to 500 people on this thing. So the more the merrier, especially as we enter more deeply into stewardship season. Now, this has been recorded in its entirety, and the slide deck will be available in English and in Spanish, and that should be up in just a couple of days, okay? Are there any other questions or concerns? Rachel? No? Okay. And I'd like to introduce the stewardship team that's been working. Of course, we have Davey, who's just been such a good friend to the diocese. Davey, you've just been a great help and a great resource. And I know we've been that for you because we're building this together, which is the wonderful thing about collaboration. So I wanted to introduce, of course, Rachel Nybeck, who has been working our chat, is on the committee, as well as Susan Scranton. And so Susan is at Grace Glendora. Rachel is at St. Cross Hermosa Beach. Michelle Rackison, our CFO, has been part of us, and she's been admitting you all as we come in. And then Eric Law, who is in charge of Kaleidoscope. And Eric, do you want to just take a minute and talk about what's happening for you next week?
Yes, the pandemic has thrown us a curve, and we make the curve into a dancing floor. So we are having our Summer Training Institute online starting Monday, the 3rd, and it's going to go through the 13th. Don't be alarmed. You can just pick one day or take the whole 9 days. And we will be experimenting with doing 2.5 hours a day of Sabbath, music, prayers, conversations, and workshops. So the first Monday will be conversation with Presiding Bishop Michael Curry, followed with a basic workshop on how to create online community using respectful guidelines, invitation, Second and third day, we'll be looking at Bible reflection as a way of forming small group, building community. So all the things that David talked about in the 3 small group gathering, you can come and pick up some really good skills to do that. The speakers we have following, some amazing people: Greg Boyle of Homeboy Industry, Becca Stevens of Thistle Farm, Kelly Brown Douglas of EDS. Really, really amazing people will be joining us. So check out, join us, and I'd love to see many of you. We are up to 100 people joining us on the first day, so really quite an exciting time. And also you can see how we're doing it as we build a plane and trying to fly it, in transforming what we do into online as well, and eventually go on hybrid. Thank you, Bishop Diane, for letting me share this with the good people.
Thank you. And if you do nothing else but go to the first one and listen to Michael Curry, our presiding bishop, he's always so much fun to listen to. Holy guacamole, the man is amazing. So if we're done, if nobody else has any other questions, I would like to ask Susan Scranton to please pray us out.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this time. We give you thanks for Davy and for Bishop Diane and all the enthusiasm. We ask that you bless us as we go our separate ways and seek to share the gifts of stewardship with our congregations. Be with us now and evermore. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So thank you all so much. Please tell your friends, come for the September 12th event. It'll be about the same timing, starting at 10. Just thank you for being here this morning. And again, everything will be available online for you. All right? God bless.